The balance of power across the Indo-Pacific is changing faster than at any point in recent decades. For years, military patrols by China and Russia have become an increasingly familiar sight across the Pacific Ocean. Powerful warships, strategic bombers, and joint exercises have been used not only to improve combat coordination but also to send an unmistakable political message. Beijing and Moscow are determined to challenge the influence of the United States and its allies throughout the region. In late July 2026, another large-scale Chinese-Russian naval patrol unfolded. The combined fleet departed East Asian waters, passed through strategic maritime choke points including the Miyako Strait and the La Perouse Strait, and continued its voyage across the western Pacific before heading toward Vladivostok. At first glance, many observers viewed the deployment as another routine demonstration of military cooperation. Similar patrols had taken place before, and regional governments had become accustomed to monitoring them without overreacting. But this time was different. While the Chinese and Russian task force was completing its mission, Japan quietly prepared a response that would signal a dramatic shift in its own defense posture. For decades after the Second World War, Japan built its security policy around a defensive philosophy. Tokyo invested heavily in protecting its territory while avoiding actions that could be interpreted as offensive military operations. That doctrine is now evolving. Growing military pressure from China around the East China Sea, frequent airspace incursions, and rising tensions over Taiwan have convinced Japanese leaders that simply reacting is no longer enough. Instead, Tokyo is building the ability to strike back if deterrence fails. The message was delivered on July 29, 2026. Operating from the Pacific, the Japan Maritime Self-Defense Forces destroyer JS Chokai, working closely with the United States Navy after months of preparation and system upgrades, successfully launched a Tomahawk cruise missile for the first time. The test represented far more than a technical achievement. It announced Japan's arrival as a country capable of fielding one of the world's most respected long-range precision strike weapons. Months earlier, the destroyer had traveled to the United States, where engineers upgraded its combat systems and crews underwent extensive training to integrate the American-made missile into Japan's existing Aegis combat network. Everything had been building toward this single launch. As the missile erupted from the Mk-41 vertical launch system, accelerating toward its target over the Pacific, the event immediately attracted the attention of military planners across Asia. For Beijing, it was impossible to ignore. China's military leadership has spent years expanding anti-access and area denial capabilities designed to keep foreign forces away from its coastline. Yet Japan was now demonstrating a weapon capable of reaching critical targets from hundreds of kilometers away without exposing aircraft or pilots to enemy air defenses. The Tomahawk's reputation has been earned over decades of combat operations. Modern Block 4 and Block V variants are designed to fly at extremely low altitude, making radar detection far more difficult. Using terrain-following navigation, GPS guidance, digital imaging systems, and advanced mission planning software, the missile can accurately engage targets roughly 1,600 kilometers away. It also carries a powerful warhead weighing around 450 kilograms and can receive updated targeting information during flight, giving commanders greater flexibility as battlefield conditions change. This combination of range, precision, and survivability explains why so many nations regard the Tomahawk as one of the most effective conventional cruise missiles ever produced. Japan's acquisition of 400 of these missiles, approved through a foreign military sales package valued at approximately $2.35 billion, marked one of the most significant upgrades in the country's modern defense history. Despite growing global demand and ongoing American military commitments elsewhere, deliveries began on schedule in March 2026. That timing proved crucial. With operational missiles now entering Japan's inventory, Tokyo possesses a capability that fundamentally changes strategic calculations across the East China Sea. Military facilities, logistics hubs, command centers, and naval infrastructure located along portions of China's eastern coastline could theoretically fall within range if a future conflict were ever to erupt. Whether those weapons are ever used is another matter entirely. Their greatest value may lie in convincing potential adversaries that launching aggression would come at an unacceptable cost. And that is precisely the essence of modern deterrence. The Tomahawk launch was only one piece of a much larger picture. On the very same day that Japan demonstrated its new long-range strike capability, another warning was being delivered, this time in the skies above the East China Sea. Radar operators monitoring Japan's air defense identification zone detected suspicious aircraft approaching the country's airspace. Within minutes, fighter squadrons from the Japan Air Self-Defense Force were ordered into the air under emergency scramble procedures. Tokyo released only limited details about the incident, avoiding direct identification of the aircraft involved. However, defense analysts had little doubt about who the message was aimed at. For years, Chinese military aircraft have dramatically increased their presence around Japan. Intelligence-gathering planes, maritime patrol aircraft, bombers, and fighter escorts have regularly operated close to Japanese territory, forcing Tokyo to respond almost daily. Every interception places pilots from both sides within close proximity, increasing the risk that a simple miscalculation could trigger an international crisis. The numbers illustrate just how intense the situation has become. During 2025 alone, Japanese fighter aircraft conducted nearly 600 emergency scrambles against foreign military aircraft. More than half of those missions were launched in response to Chinese flights. The trend has continued into 2026. Even within only a few months, Chinese aircraft accounted for the overwhelming majority of Japan's interception missions. Surveillance planes, bomber formations, and maritime patrol aircraft repeatedly approached sensitive areas near the East China Sea, testing Japan's readiness and response times. Tokyo has answered with an increasingly uncompromising policy. Instead of allowing repeated incursions to become the new normal, Japanese commanders now respond immediately whenever unidentified military aircraft approach protected airspace. The objective is clear: demonstrate that every flight will be challenged and every approach carefully monitored. This tougher posture is not limited to individual Chinese aircraft. Joint bomber patrols conducted by China and Russia have also drawn rapid Japanese responses. Whenever long-range bombers accompanied by fighter escorts appear near Japanese airspace, interceptor aircraft are already climbing toward them before they reach sensitive zones. Military planners understand that these encounters are about far more than surveillance. Each flight allows both sides to study radar coverage, communication procedures, reaction times, and command structures. In modern military competition, gathering information can be just as valuable as firing a weapon. Recognizing this reality, Japan has begun treating every interception as an opportunity to strengthen its own preparedness. At sea, on land, and in the air, the country's defense establishment is moving away from a purely reactive strategy toward one built around constant readiness. That transformation extends far beyond fighter aircraft. Japan is currently undertaking one of the largest military modernization programs in its post-war history. Defense spending has risen significantly, reaching levels not seen in generations as Tokyo works toward allocating around 2% of its gross domestic product to national defense. The additional funding is reshaping virtually every branch of the self-defense forces. Long-range missiles are being deployed to strengthen island defenses. Advanced air defense systems are being expanded. Artificial intelligence, autonomous platforms, and unmanned technologies are becoming central to future planning. Along Japan's southwestern island chain, an area viewed as strategically vital in any potential Taiwan contingency, new coastal defense networks are taking shape. These islands occupy key positions overlooking important sea lanes that would likely become major operating areas during any regional conflict. Rather than relying solely on large naval formations, Japan is building layered defenses designed to complicate any attempt by an opposing force to move through these waters. Ground-based anti-ship missiles, surveillance systems, drones, and electronic warfare capabilities are all being integrated into a single defensive network. The goal is simple but ambitious: create an environment where any hostile fleet would face continuous detection, tracking, and engagement long before reaching Japan's main islands. For Tokyo, this is no longer just about defending territory. It is about ensuring that any military operation directed against Japan, or against nearby partners, would carry enormous risks for the attacker. The Tomahawk launch may have captured international headlines, but in reality it represents only the opening chapter of a much broader transformation that is reshaping Japan's role in the Indo-Pacific. And that transformation is only accelerating. Japan's military transformation is not centered on a single missile or a single destroyer. It is a comprehensive effort to reshape the country's ability to fight and survive in one of the world's most dangerous strategic environments. Across the Japanese archipelago, defense planners are investing in systems designed to counter threats from every direction, on land, at sea, in the air, underwater, and even in cyberspace. One major focus is long-range precision strike capability. Alongside the newly acquired Tomahawk missiles, Japan is accelerating the deployment of its domestically developed long-range cruise missiles. These weapons are intended to give the self-defense forces greater flexibility by allowing them to engage hostile military targets from significant distances rather than waiting for enemy forces to approach Japanese territory. The southwestern islands have become the centerpiece of this strategy. Stretching toward Taiwan and the East China Sea, these islands form a natural defensive barrier. Their location allows Japan to monitor key shipping lanes and maintain surveillance over one of Asia's most sensitive maritime regions. New coastal missile batteries, mobile radar units, and integrated command centers are being positioned across these islands to create overlapping defensive layers capable of responding quickly to any crisis. But Japan is also preparing for the next generation of warfare. Artificial intelligence is increasingly being integrated into surveillance and battlefield management systems. Unmanned aerial vehicles are expanding reconnaissance capabilities, while autonomous underwater platforms are expected to monitor nearby waters for submarine activity. Rather than relying solely on manpower, Tokyo is investing heavily in technology that can compensate for its shrinking and aging population. The modernization effort extends to the Navy as well. Japan's Aegis-equipped destroyers are being upgraded to operate with increasingly sophisticated missile systems, providing both defensive and offensive capabilities. Meanwhile, the country's largest warships are undergoing one of the most significant transformations in modern Japanese naval history. The Izumo-class vessels, originally commissioned as helicopter destroyers, are being converted into light aircraft carriers capable of operating the F-35B Lightning II, the short takeoff and vertical landing version of the fifth-generation stealth fighter. This conversion dramatically expands Japan's ability to project air power far from its coastline. Instead of depending entirely on land-based airfields, Japan will be able to launch advanced stealth aircraft directly from the sea, giving commanders far greater operational flexibility during a regional crisis. Electronic warfare systems are also receiving major upgrades. Modern conflicts are no longer fought solely with missiles and fighter jets. Communications, satellite networks, radar systems, and digital infrastructure have become equally critical targets. By strengthening its ability to disrupt enemy sensors while protecting its own networks, Japan hopes to maintain an information advantage in any future confrontation. Beneath the surface of the ocean, another quiet revolution is taking place. Advanced underwater sensors, unmanned submarines, and smart naval mines are being incorporated into Japan's maritime defense strategy. These systems are designed to detect hostile submarines and amphibious assault groups long before they can approach Japan's shores, creating another obstacle for any force attempting to operate freely near the country's coastline. Yet all of these preparations point toward one central concern: Taiwan. From Tokyo's perspective, Taiwan is not simply another geopolitical flashpoint. Its security is closely linked to Japan's own survival. If Beijing were to launch a military operation against the island, Japanese officials believe the conflict would almost certainly spread beyond the Taiwan Strait. American military bases located in Japan would likely become essential logistical hubs for any response. That alone could make Japanese territory a target in the opening hours of a conflict. Strategically important islands in Japan's southwest could also come under pressure, as they occupy positions along the routes connecting U.S. and Allied forces to Taiwan. For Japanese planners, the implications are clear. A successful Chinese operation against Taiwan could significantly alter the military balance across the Western Pacific, placing greater pressure on Japan's sea lanes, energy imports, and national security. That is why Tokyo increasingly views the stability of the Taiwan Strait as inseparable from its own defense. Military simulations conducted by leading strategic research organizations have repeatedly highlighted the enormous costs that such a conflict would impose on every side involved. Even in scenarios where an invasion ultimately fails, the losses could include thousands of personnel, large numbers of aircraft, major naval assets, and severe economic disruption across the Indo-Pacific. These studies reinforce a simple conclusion. The best outcome is preventing such a war from ever beginning. And that is exactly what Japan's military modernization is designed to achieve. By strengthening its ability to respond across every domain, from missiles and aircraft to cyber operations and autonomous systems, Tokyo hopes to convince any potential adversary that the price of aggression would simply be too high. In today's Indo-Pacific, deterrence is no longer built on promises alone. It is built on visible capability, credible alliances, and the ability to act if diplomacy fails. While Japan was strengthening its military posture, China was pursuing a strategy that reached far beyond its own coastline. Beijing has made no secret of its determination to increase pressure on Taiwan. Instead of relying on a single approach, it combines military demonstrations, economic leverage, diplomatic isolation, and psychological pressure to gradually reshape the strategic environment. Large-scale military exercises have become one of its primary tools. Throughout recent years, the People's Liberation Army has repeatedly surrounded Taiwan with coordinated naval and air operations. Warships, fighter aircraft, missile units, and support vessels have rehearsed scenarios that analysts believe mirror the opening stages of a blockade or invasion. In July 2026, China again conducted live-fire drills near the Taiwan Strait. Although officially described as military exercises, the location and timing attracted widespread international attention. For many observers, the drills appeared designed to demonstrate how quickly Beijing could restrict access to the island during a crisis. The exercises reflected a broader military concept often discussed by defense analysts, a blockade designed to isolate Taiwan before any large-scale amphibious operation begins. Rather than immediately landing troops, China could first attempt to cut the island off from the outside world by controlling nearby sea lanes and airspace. Given Taiwan's heavy dependence on imported fuel, food, and industrial materials, even a temporary disruption could place enormous pressure on the island's economy and civilian population. Military planners have long debated how such a scenario might unfold. Some simulations suggest that sustained pressure on ports, shipping routes, and critical infrastructure could significantly complicate Taiwan's ability to maintain normal economic activity if outside assistance were delayed. At the same time, China has continued demonstrating the growing reach of its missile forces. Long-range ballistic missile tests and strategic rocket exercises have become increasingly visible, signaling Beijing's confidence in its expanding arsenal. Each launch serves multiple purposes. It provides valuable operational training for Chinese forces while simultaneously sending a political message to neighboring countries and the broader international community. For Japan, these demonstrations reinforce concerns that any future conflict around Taiwan could rapidly expand beyond the immediate battlefield. If military operations spread across the East China Sea, nearby Japanese islands, American bases in Japan, and key maritime routes could all become strategically significant. That possibility explains why Tokyo has accelerated its defense preparations over the past several years. Yet Beijing's campaign extends well beyond military affairs. China has also devoted considerable effort to reducing Taiwan's diplomatic space around the world. Countries maintaining official or unofficial ties with Taipei often find themselves under increasing political and economic pressure to reconsider those relationships. One example frequently discussed by international observers involves Somaliland. Despite lacking widespread international recognition as an independent state, Somaliland has developed growing cooperation with Taiwan in areas including trade and diplomatic engagement. Reports have indicated that China attempted to encourage Somaliland to distance itself from Taipei through economic incentives and investment proposals. However, Somaliland maintained its relationship with Taiwan, illustrating that financial offers do not always achieve Beijing's desired outcome. According to various reports, tensions surrounding this issue later expanded into disputes affecting travel, administrative systems, and regional diplomatic relations. Although many details remain contested, the episode demonstrated how competition over Taiwan increasingly reaches far beyond East Asia. Analysts warn that similar pressure could emerge elsewhere. Countries that continue engaging with Taiwan may face difficult decisions as geopolitical competition intensifies. From Africa to Latin America, diplomatic recognition has become another arena where influence is actively contested. For Beijing, reducing Taiwan's international partnership strengthens its long-term objective of reinforcing the One China principle. For Taiwan and its partners, maintaining those relationships represents an equally important strategic priority. This expanding contest shows that the struggle over Taiwan is no longer confined to military planning. It now involves diplomacy, economics, technology, and global political influence. As these competing strategies unfold simultaneously, every new development adds another layer of complexity to an already fragile regional security environment. The Pacific may remain the primary stage, but the geopolitical contest now stretches across continents, drawing in governments far removed from the waters of East Asia. And with each passing month, the stakes continue to rise. As military activity intensified across the Indo-Pacific, diplomatic relations between Beijing and Tokyo deteriorated just as quickly. Statements that were once measured became increasingly confrontational, reflecting a level of distrust rarely seen in recent years. Officials on both sides accused the other of destabilizing the region, while every new military exercise or defense announcement triggered another round of political criticism. Japanese leaders argued that the country's military expansion was a direct response to a rapidly changing security environment. With China's naval fleet growing, missile capabilities expanding, and military operations around Taiwan becoming more frequent, Tokyo insisted that strengthening its defenses was no longer optional, it was essential. Chinese officials rejected that explanation. Beijing accused Japan of abandoning its post-war restraint and warned that Tokyo's military buildup could undermine regional stability. Chinese representatives also criticized Japanese defense policy documents, claiming they exaggerated the so-called China threat while ignoring historical sensitivities in East Asia. The disagreement soon expanded beyond military policy. Economic pressure became another instrument in the strategic competition. China has long dominated the global supply of several rare earth minerals that are critical for advanced manufacturing. These materials are essential for producing semiconductors, electric vehicles, precision-guided weapons, batteries, and other high-technology products. As tensions increased, Beijing introduced tighter export controls on some of these strategic resources. Although the restrictions affected multiple countries, Japan was among the nations watching the situation most closely because of its dependence on imported critical minerals for both civilian industries and defense production. The move highlighted a growing reality of modern geopolitics. Competition between major powers is no longer fought only with warships and missiles. Supply chains, technology, energy, and industrial resources have become strategic weapons in their own right. Recognizing this shift, Japan has accelerated efforts to diversify its supply chains, invest in domestic production, and strengthen economic cooperation with partners across the Indo-Pacific and beyond. Meanwhile, the United States has continued reinforcing its alliance network throughout the region. Washington's strategy relies on collective deterrence rather than acting alone. Instead of concentrating all military power in one location, the United States is working with allies to create a network of capable partners that can respond rapidly to emerging crises. Aircraft carrier strike groups continue operating across the Western Pacific, conducting regular patrols and joint exercises with regional allies. Large multinational exercises involving the United States, Japan, Australia, and other partners have become increasingly sophisticated, focusing on missile defense, amphibious operations, anti-submarine warfare, cyber defense, and integrated command systems. These drills are designed not only to improve military coordination but also to demonstrate that Allied forces can operate together effectively under demanding conditions. Advanced missile systems have also been deployed across strategically important areas. Highly mobile launch platforms capable of firing long-range precision weapons provide additional flexibility, allowing Allied forces to respond quickly while making it more difficult for potential adversaries to target fixed installations. The Philippines has also become an increasingly important partner in regional security. Despite repeated confrontations with Chinese vessels in disputed waters, Manila has continued asserting its maritime claims while expanding defense cooperation with the United States and Japan. Incidents involving water cannons, dangerous maneuvering, and maritime standoffs have highlighted the growing tensions in the South China Sea. Rather than reducing its presence, the Philippines has chosen to strengthen coordination with its allies. Australia has followed a similar path. Canberra continues participating in major multinational exercises while investing heavily in long-range strike capabilities, advanced submarines, and closer defense integration with regional partners. South Korea, facing security challenges of its own, is also modernizing its missile defenses. New air defense systems, enhanced radar networks, and next-generation interceptors are being introduced to improve protection against increasingly complex missile threats. At the same time, Seoul is expanding research into directed energy weapons and other emerging technologies designed to counter drones and low-altitude attacks. Taken together, these developments reveal a broader transformation across the Indo-Pacific. Rather than responding individually to regional challenges, countries are increasingly coordinating their military planning, intelligence sharing, and technological development. For China and Russia, this growing web of partnerships presents a more complicated strategic environment. For the United States and its allies, it represents an effort to preserve stability by ensuring that no single power can dominate the region through military coercion alone. Whether this strategy ultimately succeeds remains uncertain. But one conclusion is already difficult to dispute. The Indo-Pacific has entered a new era, one in which alliances, technology, economic resilience, and military preparedness are becoming inseparable elements of regional security. The launch of a single Tomahawk missile did not change the balance of power overnight. But it did symbolize something far more significant. It marked the emergence of a Japan that is no longer content to rely solely on defensive measures. Instead, Tokyo is building a military capable of contributing to regional deterrence through long-range precision strike capabilities, advanced naval power, integrated air defense, cyber resilience, and close coordination with its allies. Whether these changes are enough to discourage China from using force against Taiwan remains one of the defining strategic questions of our time. Beijing continues to modernize the People's Liberation Army at an extraordinary pace. It possesses one of the world's largest navies, an expanding arsenal of ballistic and cruise missiles, sophisticated cyber capabilities, and rapidly growing aerospace forces. At the same time, China's leadership continues to describe Taiwan as a core national interest and has repeatedly stated that reunification remains a long-term objective. Yet military strength alone does not determine the outcome of a crisis. Political resolve, alliance coordination, logistics, industrial capacity, intelligence, and economic endurance all play equally important roles. That is why Japan's recent military transformation cannot be viewed in isolation. It forms part of a broader regional strategy involving the United States, Australia, South Korea, the Philippines, and other partners that increasingly view stability in the Indo-Pacific as a shared responsibility. The central idea behind this strategy is deterrence. If potential adversaries believe the military, economic, and political costs of aggression would outweigh any possible gains, the likelihood of conflict may be reduced. Whether that calculation ultimately holds depends on decisions made in Beijing, Tokyo, Washington, and other regional capitals over the coming years. Diplomacy will remain just as important as military preparedness. Even as countries strengthen their armed forces, communication channels remain essential to reducing misunderstandings and preventing incidents from escalating into wider confrontations. History has shown that periods of intense military competition are often accompanied by heightened risks of accidental escalation. A single miscalculation at sea, an encounter between military aircraft, or an unexpected political crisis could rapidly alter the security landscape. That is why confidence-building measures, crisis hotlines, and sustained diplomatic engagement remain indispensable, even during periods of strategic rivalry. For now, however, one reality is increasingly clear. The Indo-Pacific is undergoing one of the most profound security transformations since the end of the Cold War. Military modernization is accelerating. Strategic partnerships are expanding. Advanced technologies are reshaping the battlefield. And competition between major powers continues to redefine the region's future. The successful Tomahawk launch by Japan has become one of the clearest symbols of that transformation. It demonstrated that Tokyo is preparing not only to defend its territory but also to play a far more active role in maintaining regional security alongside its allies. Whether this evolving balance ultimately preserves peace or ushers in a new period of heightened rivalry will depend on the choices made by all sides. The hope shared across the international community is that these expanding military capabilities will serve as instruments of deterrence rather than weapons of war. Because while nations can prepare for conflict, lasting stability can only be achieved through responsible leadership, effective diplomacy, and a commitment to preventing confrontation before it begins. The coming years will reveal whether the Indo-Pacific becomes a model of strategic balance, or the center of the world's next major geopolitical crisis. Only time will provide the answer. If you enjoyed this analysis, let us know your perspective in the comments. Do you believe Japan's expanding military capabilities will strengthen regional deterrence, or could they further intensify the security competition in the Indo-Pacific? And what role should diplomacy play alongside military preparedness in preventing a conflict over Taiwan?